An inside look at the Chicago outfit's Elmwood Park crew. Elmwood Park has always been a major stronghold for the Chicago outfit. Although that may sound like a bad thing for that particular area, most would actually find the contrary to be true. The folks who live there never seem to miss an opportunity to speak on the fact that the neighborhoods were much safer when the mafia was around. Even though they're a criminal organization themselves, the Chicago outfit had no tolerance for high crimes in areas they consider sacred. The mob protected both Elmwood Park and Melrose Park. A lot of the bosses and upper echelon guys lived in those suburbs, so no one was allowed to drop any bodies in those areas. They were considered no-kill zones. The mob did a lot of business with the many establishments in Elmwood Park, always looking to stimulate the economy. Elmwood Park was often run by mayors, police, or other village officials that had ties to the mob or were fully in their pocket. The Elmwood Park crew is known as the money crew of the outfit. The crew has always included some of the city's largest loan sharks and bookies. One major reason why this faction has always been a prominent crew of the outfit is because Elmwood Park was the power base for outfit heavyweight and longtime boss Tony Accardo. Accardo was an early product of the Circus Gang, a collection of Northwest Side hoodlums led by Claude Screwy Maddox, who congregated at the Circus Cafe on North Avenue. Much like the old 42 Gang, the Circus Gang served as a sort of farm team for the Capone mob. Accardo, a strapping 5'9", 200-pound gangster prodigy who is the son of an immigrant shoemaker, joined the Circus Gang while he was still in his teens. He was introduced to the mob life by another leader within the gang, tough Tony Capezio, a gambling boss syndicate man and the owner of the Circus Cafe. Capezio pulled him off the streets of the Grand and Milwaukee neighborhood and gave him something more useful to do. Accardo was 17 years old and already had plenty of street experience and was also a reliable full-time criminal, which apparently checked enough boxes to be accepted and become a member of the Circus Gang. In a very short time period, Accardo became very skillful with a baseball bat, Tommy gun, and other assorted firearms. He would get even more ingrained in outfit affairs when he became the chauffeur for top outfit hitter who often frequented the Circus Cafe, Machine Gun Jack McGurn. In January 1926, the Circus Gang was having problems over turf in the north side with an equally tough Irish street gang called the Hanlon Hellcats. They were constantly encroaching on the Circus Gang's territory. Capezio advised Maddox that they should send one of their young guys to do the job, and that young guy should be Tony Accardo. They gave Accardo a Tommy gun and 3 more younger associates who were armed with shotguns. The hit squad arrived at their headquarters, the Shamrock Inn, and waited for their targets. 3 gang members of the Hellcats walked out of the establishment and were instantly shredded with bullets and left for dead. The hit squad hopped in their car and sped away from the murder scene, but a nearby police squad gave chase. During the chase, Accardo and the other 3 men tossed away their weapons, and in the matter of a few minutes, the cops had them collared. They were arrested and aggressively questioned by detectives. Now, the higher-ups didn't mind this sort of thing from happening as long as they knew that they didn't have enough evidence to convict anybody. Because this type of scenario will test the young gangsters' resolve, see if they'll hold strong or crack under intense pressure. And just like they suspected, a young Accardo kept his mouth shut, and so did his other associates, which signals to Accardo's ability to control his underlings. Of course, they had no idea Accardo would eventually go on to control the entire organization for several decades. And just like clockwork back then, the case was dropped due to lack of evidence. This ordeal was a signal to everyone that a young Tony Accardo was on his way up. It was apparent that young Tony had all the tools in his toolbox to become a top-tier gangster. Capezio and Maddox knew that this kid was swimming in potential and that the sky was the limit for this young man. By the end of the 1920s, Accardo was performing various tasks for the Capone mob while running with another young gangster of future importance, his closest friend and confidant, Felice de Lucia, or better known as Paul the Waiter Rica. After Capone was sent off to prison, the new outfit leadership was decimated by the Hollywood extortion case. Frank Nitti whacked himself, and Paul Rica and Louis Little New York Campagna were hauled off to prison. This subsequent power vacuum pulled Accardo into the administration as he would run the organization during Paul's absence and would hand off the reins to Elmwood Park to Tony Capezio. Capezio was a career criminal who specialized in armed robbery and rose to be a Capone lieutenant and declared a public enemy by law enforcement. Tony had close connections with the Capone mob, which stemmed from his longtime friendship with Capone's main lieutenant and administrator, one of the highest-ranking outfit wise guys during that time, Frank Nitti. He and Nitti fixed booze pricing and made sure that the price of illegal booze stayed high in Chicago's north side. Tony was also the mob's go-between with other notorious independent gunmen of the time, such as John Dillinger and Babyface Nelson. Capezio was responsible for getting rid of the evidence following the St. Valentine's Day massacre. He made headlines when he burnt his hands and arms when a gas canister exploded while he was torch cutting the massacre getaway car in a garage near the Circus Cafe. The incident did nothing but add to his notoriety. Tough Tony's time at the top would be short-lived, however. Capezio suffered a massive heart attack while on a golf course and died. He was only 53 years old. The crew would really come into prominence under the direction of its next skipper, Jackie Cerone. Cerone dropped out of the 6th grade and initially delivered telegrams before transitioning to mob-related employment. Cerone got his underworld start working for Tough Tony Capezio. Cerone used to work hanging sheets, which was gangster slang for posting odds, in Capezio's old betting parlor at Chicago and Western Avenue. Cerone also operated as a card dealer at Capezio's club in Cicero called The Ship. His first documented role in the outfit was as a chauffeur for Joey Aiuppa, a veteran mobster and gambling enforcer out of Cicero who later rose to lead the outfit. This position provided him direct exposure to outfit operations in the upper echelon of the organization. By the 1950s, Cerone had advanced from Aiuppa's driver to chauffeuring boss Tony Accardo, signaling growing trust within the organization. Cerone thrived in this role. He proved to be a very reliable and a smart facilitator for the bosses. Cerone became so well known for his subservient chauffeur function, he earned himself the nickname the Lackey, underscoring his starting point as a reliable but low-ranking associate who handled logistics for the higher-ups. This period laid the groundwork for Cerone's evolution from errand runner to enforcer, as he progressively assumed more significant responsibilities. And by the early 1950s, his roles expanded to include enforcement duties. By 1955, Jack Cerone was promoted to capo of the Elmwood Park crew, following the sudden death of Capezio. Cerone was considered a playboy and enjoyed dating numerous women. He was known to party at the Twist Lounge and the Emporial Inn with underling Joe Gags Gagliano. Cerone was a cunning and ruthless mobster. A good example would be when one of his guys got snatched up and held for ransom. The Bravos brothers, Nick and George, operated betting parlors for Cerone. The more prominent of the two, Nick Bravos, was once kidnapped and snatched off the street and held for a $50,000 ransom. Cerone paid the ransom to get his boy back and then hunted down the kidnappers and killed every last one involved. That little incident earned him a lot of respect on the street and greatly enhanced his profile and prestige as a gangster. That showed the Chicago underworld that Cerone was a serious guy, not to be trifled with. Jackie put to bed the lackey persona and leveled up to a top-tier outfit gangster. Not only was he an incredible earner, he just showed the world that he was a dangerous man. Jackie proved to be a strong leader, expanding the crew's operations to controlling most of the juice loan and gambling rackets in the city's west side and western suburbs. The crew began earning massive amounts of cash, eventually becoming the top earning crew in the organization. Cerone completely controlled Elmwood Park for years. The crew's bookmaking and sports betting empire was so grand it would spill into other people's territory. Jackie and Smoke Saloisio managed a lot of the bookmaking and sports betting in Melrose Park, even though that area belonged to San Battaglia. Because of his past chauffeur duties, Cerone seemed to be a favorite captain of the bosses, constantly seen with both Accardo and Aiuppa. Soon, he too would be considered a top echelon boss in the outfit. Jackie and his boys could often be seen having some drinks and socializing at their favorite watering hole, the Elmwood Park Social Club, as were future generations of crew members. Cerone was also known to be a drunk hothead at times. Nevertheless, he did his thing and built the Elmwood Park crew to be one of the more formidable crews within the outfit. In the roughly 20-year run that Jack served as capo of the Elmwood Park crew, he had a number of outfit underlings whom he supervised, some of which would eventually become leaders themselves. Notable crew members from back in the day, he had big-time labor racketeer Eco Coley. Coley served as secretary-treasurer of the Chicago Teamsters Union Local 727 for about 20 years up until his death in 1983. The Teamsters had another dose of Coley, however, as Eco Coley managed to transfer his power and influence over to his son James Coley before he died. The younger Coley was well trained by his pop and took over right where his dad left off, being a dominant force in the Teamsters in his own right for many more years. Capezio's right-hand man, Johnny Bananas DiBiase. DiBiase was a violent enforcer prone to fly off the handle at any moment. Although his unpredictable behavior limited his ascension in the organization, there is no doubt that DiBiase put the fear of God into those that owed money. Joe Fusco was a top earner in the crew specializing in white-collar rackets. Salvador Sam Messi was an outfit hitman and bookie who operated 3 off-track betting parlors on Chicago's west side. Messi was one of many organized crime figures found to be Chicago City employees by the Chicago Crime Commission. Messi was hired as a foreman in the city sanitation department as a reward from Mayor Daley for his work in the 1959 city elections. William Smoke Saloisio was an old-school Elmwood Park crew member.
He came from the outfit's other farm team, the Old 42 Gang. Smokes was an expert racketeer and a top earner in the crew. He turned out to be one of Jackie's favorites and often partnered up with him on gambling rackets.
Another Elmwood Park heavyweight was Lee Magnifici. Lee was brought into the outfit ranks by his close friend Iko Coley. Lee was a big earner and a popular Chicago gangster who was direct with the administration and considered part of the upper echelon of the outfit. Wherever Jackie was, usually Skippy wasn't far behind. Jackie had a handful of relatives who have graced the outfit ranks, the most prominent being his older brother Frank Skippy Cerone. Another one of Jackie's relatives who became a popular crew member was his cousin James Tarbaby Cerone. All these loan sharks would need somebody to enforce repayment. Enter Willie Messino. A longtime staple in the Elmwood Park crew, Willie the Beast was a collector and feared enforcer for the outfit. Willie was very effective at getting debtors to pay up and would eventually become Jackie's top lieutenant and enforcer. He would quickly earn himself a fearsome reputation for his brutality and heightened propensity for violence. A confidential informant within the outfit once described Willie as an extremely vicious individual, possibly insane. Willie was very well liked and respected within mob circles and formed a close friendship with many of his crew cohorts, most notably with his capo Jackie Cerone. Willie and Jackie were often seen together out and about, and the Elmwood Park crew would serve as Jackie's own personal administration with Messino as his consigliere. Messino's profile in the underworld would skyrocket over time, and his close relationship with Cerone would propel him into the upper echelon of the outfit and direct with the administration. Messino's name would strike fear on the streets of the Windy City as this cunning and savvy gangster proved to be a reliable and trusted leg breaker and killer for the outfit. Jackie would skipper the crew into the early 1970s, which is when he was elevated to the position of underboss. Jack then appointed Joe Gags Gagliano as the new capo of the Elmwood Park crew. Gagliano started off as a labor slugger for Frank Nitti in the 1930s. Cerone took a liking to him and put him to work in Capezio's betting parlor. Joe Gags worked his way up to being Cerone's top lieutenant and right-hand man. Gagliano would settle in as an enforcer as he built up his reputation for brutality and his extreme penchant for violence. He quickly became a trusted and influential member of the Elmwood Park crew and one of Jackie's top lieutenants and close confidant. Once Jackie handed off the crew to Joe Gags, he didn't miss a beat and took over right where Jackie left off, making money hand over fist by controlling most of the bookmaking and juice loan rackets on the city's west side. He rose to become Chicago's czar of juice loans, gambling, and jukebox rackets on the west side of the city and the western suburbs. Despite his quiet demeanor, Joe Gags seemed to be a pretty good time. Surprisingly, Joe Gags was an avid twist dancer. Joe and a few of his boys could often be seen out at the clubs enjoying the nightlife. He dated many girls and gave them expensive gifts and jewelry. Joe Gags was a baller and even had a yacht, in which he enjoyed spending time on. He would often bring his ladies or some of his Elmwood Park boys on his yacht from time to time. He lived in a modest house but bragged to his cohorts that the inside was furnished lavishly. He also owned 3 dogs that he called the Gestapo. Joe Gags had a stable of loan sharks under him. It would be during his tenure that the Elmwood Park crew became known for juice loans and was extremely profitable. Interestingly, Joe Gags had 2 former cops working for him. Big Al Sarno was a former crime fighter in blue, until he realized he was better suited causing the crime than fighting it. He eventually fell in with the Gags gang and was a collector and leg breaker for the crew. He became a loyal enforcer for Gagliano and highly respected among his mob cohorts. He became Joe's favorite guy to send out and handle the crew's toughest cases of delinquency. Chris Carty was Messino's nephew and also a former Chicago police officer that broke bad and became a full-time criminal. He worked as a strong-arm man and juice collector for Messino and later got into narcotics trafficking. Another outfit-wise guy that would have fit nicely with the lackey moniker was Butch Blasi. He perfectly played the subservient chauffeur-assistant role for most of his criminal career. Butch first settled in that role with the big boss man himself, JB, Mr. Joe Batters. When Accardo stepped back into a consigliere role and put Sam Giancana up front as boss of the outfit, Blasi assumed the same role for him. Blasi and Giancana were already buddies from the 42 days, but this arrangement solidified their bond and the pair became very close friends. Blasi's close relationship with Momo would raise his profile and propel him into the upper crust of the organization. Blasi was still Giancana's aide when he moved to Mexico and managed his affairs in Chicago. During that period on, Sam only really spoke to his 2 closest comrades, Butch and Chucky English. Once Sam was out of power and later killed, both Blasi and English seemed to be in no man's land, and their profile plummeted. Once Sam fled to Mexico, Butchie then fell in with Joe Gags and found a new home in the Elmwood Park crew. Although mob life will never be as glorious as it was when you're best friends with the boss.
Guido DiChiaro was a low-key gangster and gambling racketeer who happened to be neighbors with Gagliano. The pair became buddies and operated a lucrative jukebox racket together, which consisted of over 40 jukeboxes. DiChiaro could earn. Besides his massive jukebox business, he also controlled gambling and other illegal activities around Franklin Park. Before he became a major labor racketeer, Glimko was in the Elmwood Park crew and one of Gagliano's top guys. Glimko was originally brought into the outfit by Louis Campagna. He started off as a labor slugger under Nitty, and that's how he got to know Joe Gags. He often accompanied Gags during his nighttime excursions.
Apparently, these old Elmwood Park guys used to get crunk.
He would often be seen out enjoying the nightlife with Jackie, Joe Spad, and Joey Glimko tearing up the dance floor.
At some point, Glimko found his calling messing with these unions, and then the sky was the limit.
He was active in the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and a close associate of Teamsters President Jimmy Hoffa. By the 1950s, he was considered Chicago's top labor racketeer. A Chicago Teamsters leader was quoted in 1954 saying, "He is the mob. When he opens his mouth, that's the syndicate talking." Glimko ranked right up there with the top labor racketeers in the country. A United States Senate committee once claimed that Glimko ran the nation's most corrupt union.
Joe Spad graced the Elmwood Park crew early on in his criminal career. He was also known to work out of the Cicero crew in his later years. Joe is a bookmaker who specialized in gambling, running numerous rackets, making himself a good living. Joe Spad loved the nightlife and was always seen out with those Elmwood Park boys. Joe Spad, Jackie, Joe Gags, and Joey Glimko liked to hit the clubs, and sources indicate these guys weren't shy and would even hit the dance floor.
Sometime around 1948, a young John DiFronzo caught the eye of a then rising star in the mob, Joe Gags Gagliano.
John was then a small-time thief who quickly showed signs of great criminal prowess.
Joe Gags saw the potential and brought him to meet Jackie, and Jackie liked him, so he was brought into the fold of the outfit and put in Cerone's Elmwood Park crew.
DiFronzo was part of an impressive burglary crew early on.
They were a crew of professional thieves able to get in and out of a place with the score while evading detection rather quickly. Because they made quick work of each job, the crew became known as the 3-Minute Gang. It was reported that the average response time for Chicago PD to a burglar alarm was 3 minutes, which sounds like a stretch to me.
Unfortunately, the 3-Minute Gang did not always live up to its billing.
On December 14, 1949, being a bit too slow on a job cost DiFronzo a chunk of his nose and a bit of his freedom. During an attempted robbery of a garment shop on Michigan Avenue, Johnny DiFronzo and his crew were surprised by police. Gunshots were exchanged, resulting in DiFronzo on the ground face down and a bunch of blood and shattered glass with half his nose sliced off. Of course, it's this incident that DiFronzo earned his popular nickname, though accounts don't actually agree on exactly how it happened. CPD claimed that DiFronzo initiated the exchange by shooting at the officers. Other eyewitnesses stated that DiFronzo was on the receiving end of a shotgun blast and revolver fire after he simply shined a flashlight on 3 advancing police officers. DiFronzo and his accomplice were taken to the hospital in critical condition with gunshot wounds to the abdomen. When DiFronzo recovered, he went from a hospital bed straight into a jail cell. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison for assault with a deadly weapon. Police believe they finally broke up the 3-Minute Gang, who were credited with stealing an estimated $100,000 of garments from local shops that year. DiFronzo was far from done robbing places.
Following his release from prison, he went right back to his burglary work, reportedly partnering for a time with prolific burglar and heistman Paul Peanuts Painsko.
At some point, DiFronzo pivoted and got more involved with the crew's juice loan rackets. For a while, he was the lead collector and enforcer for the crew. Johnny No-Nos was a sly and cunning gangster, far more intelligent than most. He chose to resolve conflicts by negotiating, using words and leverage instead of going straight to the violence. Don't get it twisted though, DiFronzo is very capable, he just used violence as a last resort. Joe Gags and a few of his boys had a close call in December of '63 when charges were brought against the mobsters that stemmed from an incident when the crew had to throw a beating to a delinquent debtor. Factory worker Joseph Weisfall failed to make his weekly 25% interest payments on the $2,000 he borrowed, and those Elmwood Park guys don't take too kindly to that. They would snatch Weisfall off the street and give him tremendous beatings. After a series of beatings that left him with broken teeth, fractured ribs, and multiple head injuries, Weisfall ran to the police and gave them a play-by-play of what happened, leading to the arrest of those involved. 6 defendants were brought to trial in March of '64 for kidnapping and beating Weisfall. They were Joseph Gagliano, John DiFronzo, Joseph Lombardo, Willie Massino, Albert Cerno, and Chris Cardi. That's right, this guy was included in the indictment. A lot of people don't know that Joey the Clown Lombardo was a loan collector and enforcer under Joe Gags in the Elmwood Park crew before he was promoted and given his own crew, which would be called the Grand Avenue crew. Actually, when he took this famous mugshot of his, he was rolling with the Elmwood Park crew. It was actually from this incident I'm speaking on right now.
Gagliano's boys were unruly at arraignment, and they refused to cooperate in their processing. They wouldn't be fingerprinted, and they distorted their faces during their mugshots. In court, Weisfall told the jury that he was taken against his will to the basement of a tavern in Elmwood Park and handcuffed to a ceiling pipe.
The guys then took turns working him over.
The jury found Weisfall an unconvincing witness and had trouble with some inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. After the 7-day trial, the jury deliberated for 3.5 hours before deciding to acquit all the defendants. After that close call, the Elmwood Park crew experienced a long period of peace and prosperity. Everyone seemed to be doing well and making money. Willie Messina was getting to be an elder statesman of the crew and wanted to be making more money for himself, so he went to his captain. And Joe Gags, being the swell guy he is, gave Willie his massive juice loan operation. Joe was tired. He retired from the game and wasn't going to lift a finger. If Messina ever brought a problem to Gagliano's attention, his response always was, "You asked for all the juice loan activity in my territory, now you take care of it." Nevertheless, the longtime outfit operative was reaching legend status and was finally making real money.
Willie was a longtime Elmwood Park heavyweight and a highly respected old-timer.
He's been direct with the administration for a while now and a fixture in the upper echelon of the outfit. Joe Gags' reign as captain of the Elmwood Park crew was short and sweet, unfortunately. Gags would pass away suddenly in 1971 when he was seemingly still in his prime. He was only 56. He was replaced by his top protege, John No-Nos DiFronzo. John was to head all criminal operations in the western suburbs. His forte was labor racketeering, juice loans, and gambling rackets. John also had legitimate interests as well. He owned a car dealership and a waste hauling firm he called D&P Construction Company, a business front he controlled with his brother Peter DiFronzo. DiFronzo is said to make regular drives in his pickup truck to a local restaurant called The Loon in Elmwood Park. There he held meetings with his brother Peter, Marco D'Amico, and other underlings. No-Nos has only had minor scrapes with the law, although federal investigators have identified him as a prime suspect in an unsolved murder of Westside politician Charles Gross in 1952. And mob turncoat Nick Calabrese named DiFronzo as one of the guys present during the double murder of outfit mobsters Tony and Michael Spilotro in 1986. Despite this, he was never indicted. DiFronzo's ability to beat the government underscores his consistent use of operational caution. Although after his death, the FBI released records that indicate that John was a confidential informant. That would explain why he always seemed to slip through the cracks and was never included in the big indictments that took down most of the upper echelon of the outfit. Whatever the case, John lived a charmed mob life. It seems that he did distance himself from his crew in his later years and focused on his legitimate businesses to avoid any risks that might land him in prison. John managed to die a free man from complications from Alzheimer's in 2018. He was 89.
Joe the Builder Andriacchi was another longtime staple in the Elmwood Park crew.
He rose through the ranks of the outfit as a thief and a heist man who specialized in safe cracking, which would earn him the moniker the Sledgehammer early on for his not-so-subtle way of cracking a safe. Apparently, his burglary skills weren't good enough to prevent him from serving a 3-year stretch in prison in the late 60s. He emerged from the penitentiary a stronger criminal and continued climbing that crime ladder to become a trusted lieutenant to DiFronzo and a respected leader within the crew. He handled all Elmwood Park crew business around Rush Street and on the north side of the city. Joe the Builder was a feisty gangster. In 1958, a 25-year-old Andriacchi was arrested for assaulting a police officer. Joe was with a couple of his buddies when an officer approached him and was trying to take Andriacchi's friend in for questioning about several burglaries. Andriacchi and his other associate literally jumped the cop and handed him an old-fashioned Chicago beating. The beating left the officer with multiple injuries on his head and face, along with a concussion. It seems like Chicago didn't get involved in construction as much as the East Coast families did. If that's true, Andriacchi didn't get the memo. Joe owned a highly successful construction company and would use strong-arm tactics to acquire all the lucrative contracts, making himself a fortune. He got so busy with the construction thing, people started calling him Joe the Builder, earning him his second mob moniker, but this is the one that stuck. His construction company really helped him out come tax time. While his outfit buddies were scrambling to find some legitimate income for their tax returns, Joe was all set with his construction company. Andriacchi was also said to be a silent partner in several major restaurants in Chicago.
In 1989, the Sun-Times described him as being not only a muscle man, but smart as well, at least by gangland standards. They also reported that Andriacchi was elevated to second in command in the Chicago outfit. The Tribune echoed that notion in 1995 when they identified Andriacchi as being the underboss, responsible for the day-to-day operations in the outfit. Andriacchi has definitely had his hand in a few murders. He was the prime suspect in the 2006 disappearance and presumed murder of former outfit underboss Little Tony Zizzo. Andriacchi had a long run in the outfit at or near the top. He eventually became an elder statesman and managed to avoid the family secrets indictments that snared most of the upper echelon of the outfit, leaving him and a few other heavyweights to run the organization. Out of John's two brothers that were involved in outfit affairs, Peter seemed to be the most prominent. He was John's lackey for the most part, helping him manage his vast array of rackets. The types of crimes Peter was into were robbery, heists, and hijacking. Peter was handed a decade in prison in 1965 after he and two others robbed a warehouse of a bunch of cigarettes and other resellable items. FBI agents arrested Peter in early as '61 when a tractor-trailer he was driving caught their eye. The agents wondered if the vehicle was stolen, so they went and checked. Inside, Peter lost his cool and panicked. He jumped out of the truck and took off on foot. Agents nabbed him on North Manheim Road in Stone Park. They found that the trailer contained thousands of dollars worth of stolen cigarettes. The cigarettes were found to be part of the loot taken at gunpoint from a grocery warehouse several days earlier. In early January of '62, a federal grand jury in Milwaukee indicted Peter DiFronzo and Anthony Dadino for conspiring to transport stolen cigarettes and other easily resellable goods, and they were convicted. Peter stayed a loyal confidant to his brother for the rest of his life and even took over the crew following John's death in 2018. And on December 4th, 2020, Peter DiFronzo died at the age of 87 from COVID. Joseph DiFronzo made headlines in the early 1990s with what was described as the largest indoor marijuana farm in the state of Illinois. In March of '92, authorities seized 1,600 live plants from a basement of a home in the Chicago suburb of Inverness. The basement was equipped with bright grow lights and an automatic watering system. Authorities eventually discovered that it was Joe that spearheaded the grow operation. A grand jury returned a 7-count indictment, but Joe DiFronzo is nowhere to be found. He took off and was on the lam for over 5 years. The guy that owned the Inverness home pled guilty and told prosecutors he obtained a $10,000 loan through Joe DiFronzo with a weekly interest of 5%. He couldn't keep up with the payments and the balance owed grew to $18,000 in just a few months. Joe suggested that he could erase the debt by agreeing to grow marijuana in his home, and he did for about 2.5 years before the raid. In May of '98, FBI agents finally arrested Joe DiFronzo, then 63, at an apartment in Boca Raton, Florida. He pled not guilty to the charges against him, but was convicted. For years, D'Amico was considered the Chicago outfit's top sports gambling figure and a trusted lieutenant and confidant to Johnny DiFronzo. The veteran gambler took a handful of gambling-related pinches throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but what really raised eyebrows was the brawl he was involved in on the corner of Oak and Rush Street in 1978. Reports claim this was an epic brawl where Marco took on multiple guys and got the best of them. D'Amico was a big-time earner and a shrewd businessman who loved to party. Marco was famous in Windy City mob circles for being a man about the town on Rush Street in a swinging heyday. D'Amico was arrested twice for a DUI in '83 and '89, but it's the '83 incident that'll go down in infamy in the Chicago underworld. Apparently, Marco was hammered because when the officer asked him questions about his identity, D'Amico became frustrated and actually bit off the cop's finger. He was charged with aggravated battery. However, when the officer learned who Marco was, he refused to press charges and they were dropped. D'Amico was a popular Chicago wise guy and rose through the ranks pretty quickly. He was a gifted racketeer specializing in sports betting and gambling. He became DiFronzo's right-hand man and most trusted lieutenant. Over time, D'Amico became a serious heavyweight. He exerted significant control over outfit gambling enterprises, overseeing a massive sports bookmaking operation and a high-stakes poker game for many years. Marco helped No-Nos coordinate rackets across the northwest side and western suburbs, supervising the crew's loan sharking rackets and enforcing street tax and protection payments. Marco also ran executive card games, which was a fancy name for high-stakes poker for high rollers. He also sponsored crews that robbed competing games. D'Amico's illegal gambling enterprise has amassed over $1.3 million in bets, which bolstered the crew's financial dominance in Chicago's gambling underworld. Then in November of '94, D'Amico was hit with a slew of racketeering charges. He was indicted for conspiring to commit robbery, operating a sports book and poker business for about a decade and a half, using extortion to collect gambling debts and juice loans, and racketeering. The litany of charges resulted in a decade in prison for D'Amico.
When he was released in 2005, he assumed a semi-retired advisory role. When his friend and boss, John DiFronzo, took the reins of the family in 2009, he promoted Marco into the administration to be his consigliere, a position he held until his death in 2020. It seems like just about everybody had that one protege they're really close to, and Marco was no different. His closest underling was Bobby the Boxer Abenanti. Abenanti was a former amateur heavyweight boxer and fought in local Chicago amateur events such as the Golden Gloves and the Chicago Park District tournaments. Abenanti is the only known participant to be removed from a Chicago Park District tournament. Bobby got a bit frustrated with his opponent during a match, so he actually grabbed the guy, picked him up, and threw him out of the ring. Apparently, that sort of thing's frowned upon over there. After that, Bobby coached a few fighters and a high school football team. Then he went to work for the city as a streets and sanitation department truck driver. Bobby eventually fell in with the Elmwood Park crew and under the direction of Marco the Mover. He was a collector, enforcer, and bookie and was later active in Teamsters Local 726. Dom was one of the top earners in the crew and one of the largest bookies in the Midwest. Basso was the overseer of the outfit's betting operations in DuPage County in the northwest suburbs during the 80s and early 90s. Dom made national headlines due to the big Pete Rose scandal when he was identified as Pete's bookie. Dom was the guy Pete Rose was calling to place all his bets, and the guy taking all his glorious baseball money. Marco D'Amico's other top lieutenant was Anthony Doty. Being a D'Amico protege, there's no surprise Doty specialized in sports betting and gambling. Tony eventually became a heavyweight in the crew and Marco's right hand. The pair ran a massive bookmaking operation together for years until the government dropped the hammer on them in November of '94, indicting them both for racketeering and other gambling-related crimes. They both had to do a little time for that, although things would get worse for Doty. The feds hit him with the old 1-2 by indicting him once again for the exact same thing. Apparently, getting sent to prison did little to discourage Tony from running gambling rackets, because by the time he got sentenced 2 years later in '96, he was already knee-deep in a whole new, completely different gambling enterprise, which the feds knew about. First indictment was for an operation he ran from 1979 to '92 and led to a 50-month prison sentence. The government waited until November of 2000 to hit him with that second indictment when he was out of prison and all settled back on the street. Tony's brother Carl was also a prominent guy in the Elmwood Park crew. He didn't have the business acumen his brother did and was his aide, more or less. He would help manage his brother's gambling rackets, and whenever Tony would have to go serve a bid, Carl would step in and run things for him. Scalise was a crew enforcer that knew how to make their extortion victims come off that cash. He wouldn't hesitate to throw somebody a beating, but on the same token, he wouldn't miss an opportunity to take over somebody's business. With John and Pete DiFronzo, Marco the Mover, and Joe the Builder all dead, it seems that the power went to Rudy the Chin Fratto as the next boss of the Elmwood Park crew. Rudy comes with a bit of mob pedigree. He was the nephew of the notorious Fratto brothers, the outfit's men in Des Moines, cockeyed Louis Fratto and Frank One-Ear Fratto. These familial links position young Rudy within proximity to the Chicago Outfits network from an early age. By the 70s and 80s, Fratto's early positions evolved to include oversight in juice collections and dispute resolution in Elmwood Park, positioning him as a loyal and reliable enforcer under the DiFronzo brothers. Most sources have him getting his button on Father's Day in '98. By the mid-2000s, Fratto had advanced to a lieutenant position within the crew, handling supervisory duties. If the Elmwood Park crew is still functioning, the government alleges that this guy's the captain. His ascent was accelerated by the leadership vacuum created by the deaths of John and Peter DiFronzo in 2018 and 2020. FBI reports indicate Fratto's promotion to capo regime was around 2021, consolidating control over the crew's rackets in gambling, loan sharking, and labor influence. During Fratto's tenure, the crew engaged in schemes to infiltrate legitimate businesses, most notably a 2006 bid rigging plot at the McCormick Place Convention Center to secure lucrative forklift contracts. Fratto would also get himself in hot water with the IRS and get hit with tax evasion charges. Following his release from prison in 2011 after serving sentences for tax evasion and bid rigging, Fratto resumed a low-profile role, maintaining influence over the Elmwood Park crew. Federal authorities have identified him as continuing to function as the capo regime of the Elmwood Park regime and overseeing operations despite his old age and prior incarceration. As of 2025, Fratto continues to direct the crew's activities, supported by younger associates loyal to his leadership. Although not nearly as strong as it once was in its heyday, it appears the Elmwood Park crew is still alive and kicking, albeit I think it's safe to say they're probably on life support. Other notable crew members through the years.
The legendary Elmwood Park crew has had a rich history involving a one-of-a-kind cast of characters. As far as top-earning crews go, this crew is a juggernaut that could likely go toe-to-toe with any East Coast crew. The Elmwood Park crew was a special outfit crew, and they produced many administration guys. Most of its leaders had become bosses, underbosses, and consiglières alike. Not to mention, this crew has produced some of the biggest bookies and loan sharks this country has ever seen, earning millions of dollars through the years. It seems most people like to focus on the most violent crews, with guys running around killing everybody. Well, this is an example of the opposite. This crew operated with a lot less violence, which didn't draw the attention of law enforcement, allowing them to operate their rackets and generate profits with very little interference from the law. They were so tight-knit, they didn't have guys flip, and if somebody had to do some time, it was usually just a few years. This crew ran like a well-oiled machine for decades. There's no doubt the Elmwood Park crew was an important cog in the big bad mafia machine that is the Chicago outfit.